The gravel crackled under my tires as I pulled up to the front gate, my front gate. There were more cars than I'd seen in years. Headlights pointed every which way, some parked on the lawn, others half up on the ditch. Music thumped from somewhere behind the barn, loud enough to rattle the metal gate hinges. A man I didn't recognize stepped out from the shadows. He wore a stiff polo with the logo of some event company stitched near the collar, clipboard in hand, radio clipped to his belt. He didn't smile. "Private event," he said. She said no outsiders. I asked, though I already knew. My voice came out calmer than I expected. He glanced at his clipboard, not bothering to look me in the face. Ava, the host. I stepped out of the truck and looked past him. From the top of the drive, I could just make out the strings of lanterns draped across the barn. The same ones Wade and I hung the first Christmas after his father died. My porch was glowing with golden light. Tables were covered with white cloths. Someone was carving brisket. And there she was, Ava wearing a dress that caught the light, laughing as she handed my son a drink. Wade leaned in to whisper something to her. She touched his arm gently, then raised her glass. The crowd around them cheered. Above their heads, a banner stretched across the porch columns. "Happy birthday, Wade, love your family." But I hadn't been told. I hadn't been invited. I wasn't even a guest. The guard shifted on his feet. "Ma'am, I need you to turn around if you're not on the list." I nodded once. Not to him, to myself. I didn't argue. I just got back into my truck, turned off the headlights, and drove slowly around the back pasture toward the hill behind the barn where no one was looking. I parked behind the tool shed and walked the narrow path I knew by heart, up toward the ridge that overlooked the barn. The air was cooler there, sharp with mesquite and dry grass. I stood under the old juniper tree, the one Wade used to climb when he was a boy, back when scraped knees were the worst thing in the world. From up here, I could see it all. The porch was glowing with lanterns, every bulb one I had screwed in myself last fall after a windstorm. The fence posts lining the drive were the same ones I helped Henry sink into the earth 30 years ago. I remembered every board, every dent. I built this place with calluses, and tonight it looked like I had never existed. Ava stepped into frame, phone angled just right. I watched her pause, smile tap. I pulled out my own phone a minute later and saw it. Our house, our party, our family. Hundreds of hearts. Comments from people I didn't know, calling it beautiful, perfect. Wade was in the photo, his arm around her, holding a plate of brisket, like a man in his own castle. He didn't look up once. It had been 6 years since Henry passed. I'd offered them the main house, told Wade it was time for him to lead the land. I moved into the casita behind the stables without protest. I planted herbs near the window, kept my boots by the back door. I never thought stepping back meant disappearing. I leaned against the tree and let the sounds of laughter drift up the hill. It didn't sting the way I thought it would. Not like a burn, more like a slow unthreading. A quiet unraveling of something I hadn't noticed was loosening. Below, someone turned on the string lights in the barn. It lit up like a postcard. And all I could think was they don't even know where the generator is. It was sometime in April when Ava brought up the paperwork. She sat across from me on the porch legs, crossed sunglasses perched high on her head like she was always ready to leave. "Just a formality," she said. "If anything happens, it'll make things easier, for taxes, for estate clarity." I nodded. Let her finish. Then I said I'd think about it. The next morning, I called Lila. We've been friends since high school, and after Henry died, she helped me sort through the pile of forms and lawyer talk that followed. When I told her what Ava had asked, she didn't hesitate. "Don't transfer anything," she said. "Put the land in a trust. Quietly. Keep control," so I did. Now, standing under the tree, I watched 2 women in matching black polos lead my horses around the yard for photo ops. One of them was brushing Locket, my old mare, with glitter. Glitter. A little boy with a chocolate-covered face ran up and slapped her flank. She flinched. No one stopped him. I could see straight into the living room through the open windows. Ava was showing off the new backsplash in the kitchen, one I never approved, never knew they installed. I saw her lean in close to someone and say, "We've really made it ours." Ours. The same word she used when she asked about the paperwork. The same word Wade used when they moved in. But it wasn't theirs. And I hadn't forgotten that. I stepped away from the ridge and made my way down the slope, boots crunching soft earth, until I reached the corner behind the tool shed. There it was, tucked behind a lean-to, wrapped in shade. The generator. Henry and I bought it during the big storm in '93. He said it'd outlive us both. It hummed softly, steady and low like a heartbeat. I placed my hand on the warm metal housing and waited. Not yet. But close. I waited until the last sparkler fizzled out. The music had gotten louder, the kind of pulsing beat that didn't belong on soil this old. Voices rose with the bass, drinks sloshed onto my porch steps, and somewhere between dessert and midnight I saw someone toss a beer can into the trough. So at exactly 11:03, I did what they never expected. I pulled the switch. Everything died at once. The barn went black. The fairy lights blinked out. The speakers choked mid-chorus. For a second, the only sound was confusion, shoes scraping gravel, someone dropping a glass, then the first shriek. A child wailed. Flashlights whipped across the lawn like frantic fireflies. I stepped out from behind the shed and walked into the middle of the drive. No spotlight found me. I didn't need one. "This land is not for sale," I said. My voice wasn't raised, but it carried. "Not for show, and not yours." People froze. One man bumped into a planter and cursed. Someone called Ava's name in a shaky voice. A teenager near the porch gasped, phone raised but catching nothing. Then I saw him. Wade standing by the gate with a plate still in hand, his face pale in the moonlight. He moved toward me fast, like he couldn't believe I was real. "Mom," he said. I didn't answer. Just turned and walked toward the edge of the pasture toward the tree line. I didn't want to see what Ava looked like when she realized the power wasn't coming back. I let the darkness stay. The party broke up in silence. No music to drown the awkward. No lights to soften the looks. Just whispers and scattered steps. Guests trudging to their cars, shoes sinking into the dirt I kept watered every morning. By the time I reached the fence line, the last engine started. I stayed out there until the quiet settled, until the air was still again. And when the moon shifted through the branches, I remembered Lila's envelope sitting in my kitchen drawer. 2 days passed before I said a word to anyone. Then I called Lila. We met at the small cafe near the grain co-op, the one with the crooked blinds and burnt coffee. She was already there when I arrived, sipping from a chipped mug legal pad tucked under her arm like always. Neither of us wasted time on small talk. She slid the envelope across the table. "Everything's still solid. The trust is intact. No movement on their side." I opened it just to see it again for myself. The title, the terms, the signature in my own handwriting. Wade had never been listed. Ava never had a claim. The ranch was mine. Still was. Always had been. "I haven't made any changes," I said quietly. Lila just nodded. "But you could." I folded the papers and tucked them into my purse. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. Back at the ranch, the weekend's mess had been cleaned up. The porch was clear. The tables were gone. But something was off. The silence was different now. Like the house itself had taken a step back, wary. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Wade. No voicemails. I didn't call back. Instead, I grabbed my wide-brimmed hat, tied my boots, and started walking. I made the full loop around the property, just like Henry used to. Past the north fence where the paint was chipping. Down by the dry creek bed. up to the southern boundary where the wild sage grew thick in the wind. 37 markers. I counted each one. I stopped near the far gate where Wade carved his initials into the post when he was 12. The wood was cracked now, the letters shallow, but still visible. It had faded, but it hadn't disappeared. Neither had I. As I turned back toward the barn, I noticed Ava's latest posts were gone. The party, the caption about their land, even the tagged photos, all vanished. But I wasn't erasing anything. I was only remembering. And the dinner she wanted. That would come next. She showed up around dusk holding a plastic container with a label still on it. Something from the store bakery aisle pretending to be pie. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile wasn't. "We should talk," she said like it was her idea. I didn't invite her in. We sat outside, 2 chairs pulled under the sky, the air thick with something unspoken. The only sound was the wind in the mesquite and the creak of Ava adjusting her blouse every time the silence stretched too long. She started light commenting on the weather, asking if the generator had been fixed. I nodded where I needed to, but gave her nothing. Her charm had always been quick, polished, rehearsed. But without an audience, it unraveled fast. "You embarrassed us," she said at last, her voice low and sharp. "People asked if you were a squatter. Someone said it looked like you'd crashed the party." I didn't answer right away. I just reached into the pocket of my flannel and pulled out the folded deed. I'd kept it with me since the cafe. "This says otherwise." She stared at it, lips pressed so tight they lost color. Then her tone shifted. "Cold now. You wouldn't evict your own son." I looked at her, really looked. At the way her hand tightened around her phone. At the flash of calculation in her eyes. "I'd protect what's mine," I said, steady. "Even from my own blood." She opened her mouth like she might argue, then shut it. The pie sat untouched between us, sweating in its plastic lid. She left without saying goodbye. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the pasture. I didn't move from my chair. I sat there until the last light disappeared behind the barn, thinking about how many meals I'd made for that house. How many nights I'd left the porch light on just in case Wade came home late. That night I didn't turn it on. And in the morning, it wasn't Ava who came to speak, it was Wade. He came by the next morning just after the fog had lifted off the fields. No call, no text, just showed up near the stables, hands in his pockets, face drawn like he hadn't slept. "I figured we should talk," he said. We sat on the old bench near the trough, the one Henry built out of salvaged barnwood. Wade stared out across the pasture like he didn't know how to start. I waited. "Ava had some ideas," he said finally. "Nothing set. Just thoughts. About maybe fixing up the house, turning it into a retreat, like a getaway thing, for rental income." I didn't say anything. She wanted to make it more presentable. Modern. Still, I said nothing. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't know about the party guest list. I swear, she handled that. I figured you'd come down if you wanted." "You figured I'd just walk into a party I wasn't invited to?" I asked. He looked at me, winced. "I didn't think you'd care," he said. The words didn't come with malice. Just carelessness. Casual dismissal. I turned to him. "You didn't think I'd care about my own home?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "You don't even live in the main house." And there it was. I stared at him for a long time. Not in anger, just realization. I had moved out so quietly, given them space so generously, bit my tongue at every paint choice, every furniture swap, every schedule change with the animals. I'd handed over comfort wrapped in silence. And in return, they'd forgotten I existed. That was my mistake. I stood up slowly. "The house isn't the ranch," I said. "And the deed doesn't stop at the front porch." Wade didn't argue, just nodded like he didn't know what else to do. I left him there under the soft sun, sitting where his father used to. And I walked back toward the kitchen to retrieve the envelope again. There were changes I needed to make. And that would start with a lock. I called a locksmith first thing Monday morning. He showed up in a dusty van, didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just did the job. Every exterior door, every gate latch, every padlock on the barn. I paid in cash and handed him a cold bottle of water when he finished. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and wrote the letter. It wasn't cruel, just clear. Wade and Ava were welcome to stay for now, but they'd need to sign a lease. 30 days to respond. After that, the arrangement would change. No assumptions, no inheritance, no illusions about ownership. It was never about kicking them out. It was about reminding them I hadn't left. Ava showed up storming, called it a betrayal, said I was tearing the family apart. Her voice echoed across the porch loud enough for the chickens to scatter. I didn't respond, just handed her the letter again and walked back inside. Wade came the next day. Quiet eyes low. He read the lease twice, pen hovering for a full minute. Then he signed. No questions, no thank you either. Just quiet resignation, like a child finally understanding a rule was real. I put the papers in a folder, locked them in the old cedar chest, and didn't look back. That Friday I made stew, picked tomatoes from the garden, baked cornbread that cracked just right at the top. I invited the neighbors who still called me Miss Calinda. A few ranch hands brought their kids. We sat out under the string lights, my string lights, and passed plates without fanfare. There were no banners, no speeches, no Instagram stories. Just food, real people. I sat at the head of the long table in the chair Henry once claimed every Sunday. No one questioned it. No one asked who lived where. I poured coffee for the foreman's wife and watched the sky turn peach behind the barn. The porch light flickered on behind me, automatic and soft. And just before dessert, someone mentioned the fig tree I'd planted. The first real rain of the season came at dawn, soft and steady. By the time I stepped outside, the ground was dark and damp, the air carrying that deep, earthy scent that always made the ranch feel alive again. The horses were already at the fence line, noses outstretched, nudging my pockets the way they used to when Wade was small enough to ride bareback. I scratched along their jaws and let them breathe against my palms. They never forgot me. Animals are honest that way. The barn lights hummed when I turned them on, my switch, my timing, my meter. Nothing flickered without my permission anymore. The whole property felt different, quieter, but more itself, as if it had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. Inside the main house, curtains stayed shut most mornings. Ava hardly stepped outside except to check the mail, and even then, she kept her eyes lowered. Wade did small chores without being asked, mowing the pasture in long, uneven lines. He wasn't used to doing the work himself, but he was learning. I walked the porch slowly, boots knocking against the boards. At the far end lay a patch of fresh soil I'd prepared the day before. I knelt and set the sapling into the earth, a young fig, the kind my grandmother coaxed to grow in the toughest corners of her yard. A tree that would hold on even through winds that stripped the rest of the land bare. I packed the soil around it firm and sure. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't meant to be seen. It was just something that would stay quietly the way I had stayed long before anyone thought to look. When I straightened, the house behind me was still. The animals were grazing. The new fig's leaves trembled in a faint breeze catching the light. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. By evening, the clouds had thinned, and in the fading gold of the sky, I realized there was one more thing left to decide. The letter came in early spring, tucked between feed catalogs and a power bill. It was from the County Historical Society. Someone had nominated the ranch for a preservation feature, Old Family Land Multi-Generational Stewardship, still active. They wanted to include me. I said yes. A week later, a photographer arrived with a wide-brim hat and a dusty camera bag. He didn't ask to go inside. Instead, He followed me along the fence line, taking photos of the barn's weathered siding, the old branding post, the fig tree starting to take hold. He was polite, thoughtful, asked the kind of questions I hadn't been asked in years, not about profit or remodeling, but about memory. "How long's the ranch been yours?" he asked as he adjusted his lens. "Since I said no, I said." He laughed, thinking it was a joke. I let him. Later, we sat on the porch while he jotted notes. He asked if I had any old pictures. I brought him one tucked inside a wooden box beneath the kitchen sink. It was me and Wade. He must have been 7. We were covered in mud, both of us grinning, wide boots kicked off in the grass behind us. Henry had taken it after we'd fallen, trying to herd a stubborn calf. Back when laughter came easy and no one asked who owned what. The photographer looked at it a long time. "That's a good one." I nodded. "That's before they stopped seeing the woman behind the land." He glanced up. "You ever think about selling?" I looked out past the porch where the fig tree caught the light just right, where the barn door swung open in the breeze, where Lockett trotted slow along the fence, head high. "Not everything has a price," I said. He didn't press, just packed up his gear and thanked me for my time. Said they'd let me know when the article was live. I watched him drive off, dust curling behind his tires. Then I turned back toward the house. There were wildflowers to trim, and I wasn't done planting.